Good evening Cebu, good evening Philippines. It's Open Mic Night once again, and it's our 11th episode. It's November 11 and it's our 11th episode, so it's 11th on 11/11. And we have a very special guest. Her grandfather was once president of the Republic, and so was her mom. Luli Arroyo, but she goes by Luli Bernas now.
Hello,
Luli,
Mike.
welcome to the show. Thank you for flying over.
Thank you for inviting.
So we're gonna talk about her mom, the achievements of your mom. So what's the one thing, it's really sad that your mom can't be here with us right now. She's in detention, but a lot of people are starting to take notice, of all the good things she has done for the country, despite all the criticisms. Do you think it's worth it that she became president, despite what she's going through right now?
I think if you ask her that, she would say it was worth it. I think that was one of the things we learned from my grandparents, that you have to do your part in nation building, and it's always building on what others have done. Build on that, and then lay a good foundation for future generations.
That's right, another stone for
yes,
the edifice.
a stone for the edifice.
Yeah.
That's right.
And but if you can turn back time, knowing that after her term this would happen, would you, if you had a choice, go over everything again?
It's hard to say. I think obviously there's a big personal toll, but to see that the country is resilient, and that is because of the foundations laid by my mother's term, difficult though it was.
Yes.
I think if you ask her, she probably would have said
she'd go through it again.
She would, but personally, I would do certain things differently.
Yeah. In hindsight, lessons learned.
Yes, certainly.
And the people you trust also.
Yeah.
But so you talk about the economy, and Filipinos, we're very emotional, and very few actually study the economy and the data. And she's not being given enough credit for the macroeconomic gains that were made during her time. But you also studied economics?
I did.
Yes. So
surprisingly, I did.
So, can you discuss the things, the major achievements in terms of economy that your mom left?
Well, like I said, she laid the foundations for a strong and resilient economy. So, during her term, we saw 9 years of stability, and that's
in several quarters of uninterrupted economic
yes.
growth, like 40 plus or something.
37 quarters, and in the midst of uninterrupted growth, we never went through a recession despite a global recession.
Yes.
So that's a big achievement, and that's why her Secretary of Finance garnered awards, a global award for that. But that's because her economic team, led by her, they really looked at what policies needed to be put in place to have a stable economy, and not just for the medium term, but for the long term.
But as a leader, I think one important attribute your mom has, and I say has because until now, is that she's not one to see things in terms of popularity.
No,
she
not
has
at
the
all.
balls to effect all the needed change. Despite some of the reforms that she put in place, despite these reforms being unpopular, she
Right.
pushed for them.
Well, one big turning point was the VAT.
Yeah, expanded VAT.
Yes. So that was certainly unpopular, and some of the legislators who had to be the ones to push it through, lost in the next elections after that. But that is what gave our government the funds to be able to push forward the programs needed. So to this day, we are enjoying the hardships that we had to undertake during that time.
The resilience of our economy came at a very high cost politically.
Yes.
For your mom and for those who supported
Yes.
the measures. But into the 2007-2008 global economic meltdown, we were one of the very few countries who
Right.
actually grew.
Yes.
Not only
just
survived,
zero
break
percent,
even,
but yes,
we grew.
But we had positive growth.
Yeah, that's why it's uninterrupted, no, the growth. And then if you look at the data, that's why, let us be fair, no? I mean, GMA was not a very good communicator in a sense. I mean, she didn't, maybe that was her weakness. Would you agree? She didn't really,
Well, I liken her term to Osmeña's. President Osmeña, during his
Osmeña.
time, yes, he was also not popular because for him, what was important was you have to concentrate on the work. So he really didn't care about campaigning or publicity. For him, you just have to do the work, and that cost him the elections. So it's the same with my mother.
against Rojas.
Yes. So with my mother, you know, everybody was always saying you have to focus on the PR, but for her, that really isn't so important. You need to get things done. And that to her was what was important.
You make this comparison with Osmeña, and you know, at that time there was no social media, and mass media was also very limited. I mean, what was that? Radio?
Radio, periodico,
but
yes.
there was no TV, and now there's live TV, there's live tweeting, and all of these
Yes.
things. But of course, during your mom's term, it was social media was not as
No.
not as active as it is now, no. But in hindsight, don't you think she should have also made sure that she was able to communicate her agenda more clearly to the public so that they rally behind it?
Of course, I mean, there's always that aspect of having to communicate things better. But if
But
you
at
have
that time-
people who don't accept it anyway, and these are issues that were, or up to now, are not simple. They were very complicated issues. You know, as you say, there are opportunity costs to certain things. So she chose the harder route.
And she chose to focus
On the work,
on the
for
work
sure.
at hand. And so, but I think it's not very fair how she's being judged. And I think as Filipinos, we have to learn. This is my idea, okay? But I think we have to learn how to compartmentalize issues, no, and not just muddle everything up in terms of emotions and labels, etc. But if you study, for example, the performance, if your indicators, for example, are the GDP, the what you call this, the exchange rate,
Right.
Our debt to GDP ratio, our debt, like for example,
Yes.
the budget, balancing it, she has the best performance.
Well, it was during her term that we became a lender to the IMF
Started
Yes.
then, no?
rather than a borrower.
Yeah.
So that was a big deal. And during her time, our debt ratio really went down. I think it was 55%, and by the end of her term, it was 40 plus, maybe mid 40%. So that's a big deal.
Yeah, but these are details that are kind of highbrow, no, for the average Filipino to understand. But the data, they don't lie.
Well, I remember during that time, I was on a trip in the Middle East, and I was sitting next to a Filipina, and she was complaining because she said that our exchange rate has improved, so it's bad for us.
Yeah.
So I said, who told you that? And she said, oh, there were certain, overseas organizations that were left-leaning who were saying that if the peso is strong, it's bad for the OFW. So I had to explain that, well, in a way, it's bad for exports. And sure, you buy what you
Purchasing
send home, you buy less pesos with it. But you also look at the other side. Having a strong peso means that our economy is becoming more resilient, because that means that the demand for our peso is higher.
And that brings about more investments,
Yes.
more jobs.
Yeah.
All in all, better economy, more more jobs for
Yes,
people.
and inflation goes down.
Goes down because the purchasing power of the peso is higher.
That's right.
And speaking of the peso dollar exchange, it's also it's very you can really notice it. I mean, it doesn't take an economist or a genius to be able to see the pattern that even from your grandfather's time or even before that, the peso has consistently weakened against the dollar, from 2 pesos to $1 to 15 pesos to 1.
Right.
And in the early 90s, it was 25 pesos to the dollar. And right before Arab was ousted, it was almost 60 pesos
Yes.
to the dollar. And then your mom becomes president, and for the first time, it bounces back.
Yes.
The only time it ever bounced back was under your mom. From 60 pesos, from almost 60 pesos, right before she stepped down, it was like 42.
46.
Or wait, no, it was,
42, yes.
thereabouts. I mean, that's the first time that the peso actually bounced back, and people don't notice it. And then I remember,
Well, and that it was gradual. So it wasn't also a sharp decrease where the exporters couldn't
yes.
cope with the change in demand.
In fact, I remember a conversation with your mom, and she said it would have even been it would have been stronger, but that she made sure that there were certain measures
Yes.
to stop it because she cared for the OFWs.
Yes.
For exactly what we were saying about that person
You
you
can't
met.
right. You can't have a drastic drop or change in your exchange rate because your exporters are going to suffer. And those sending home their dollars, the remittances, will also suffer. So it really does need to be gradual so that the people can adjust to the changes.
Yeah, and that's why for me, that's why I appreciate your mom, because she said, it would have been good for her if it strengthened even more to 30 plus. But she had to find the right
You
balance,
need to find the balance
for the people,
yes.
and of course for investments. But okay, we have to pause for a break. Open Mic will be right back with Luli Arroyo. We're back here in Open Mic with Luli Arroyo Burns. We were talking about the economy before we paused for a break. How different is your mom's economic, her perspective on economics as opposed to your lolo? Because your grandfather, President Diosdado Macapagal, was also an economist,
Yes.
right?
He had a PhD in economics as well.
And he was a lawyer.
And he had a PhD in law as well.
So the same, they're both doctors of economics.
Yes.
But how similar and how different are they in terms of?
Grandfather's time, I mean, he was really at the stage where there were so many controls on the economy that were in place from the Commonwealth.
Yes.
So it was during his time when he started a lot of the decontrol programs and promoting private sector industries. So because for him it was important that government shouldn't be in businesses where private sector
Can be.
yes. So his program was agro-industrialization, and that was also something that my mother wanted to push.
And your grandfather, the centerpiece also of his government was agrarian reform,
Yes.
right? And then your mother, industrialization was also something she wanted to
Yes.
push, but
Even when she was in the Department of Trade and Industry, she really pushed for industry to go to the countryside and not just be concentrated in Metro Manila. So a lot of her work brought her to Mindanao, to
Decentralization.
Visayas, yes, because you really need to bring industry to where the people are.
and we felt that here in Cebu,
Yes.
no? We felt that a lot of my friends and relatives throughout the Visayas and Mindanao have felt the presence of the national government. The farm to market roads,
Yes,
you have the RORO, the roll-on, roll-off,
Yes.
the nautical highway. And her goal was really eventually, the goal of decentralization was to federalize.
Yes.
Yeah.
For her, she really believed that that was the next step. You give power to the local government.
Devolution.
Yes, but also you have to give more of a say to the locals in the countryside on how they use their money. So that to her made sense. So the other thing that she also did, I mean, she looked at infrastructure. So for instance, in Bohol, she made sure that the infrastructure was there to support the growing tourism industry.
Yeah.
So up to today, when I go there, you know, people, even if they don't know that I'm the daughter of
President
the
Arroyo.
former president, they always say, you know, this road was built during her time, and they're so thankful because it really helped them. So it helped them get out of the 20 poorest provinces at the time.
I noticed that she really focused on the strengths
Yes.
of each region, and diba, she came up with the super regions,
Yes.
and in it focused on the strengths and the products of each region. And I remember Central Visayas as a super region, we were focused on tourism, no? And then Mindanao was the food basket. So it was it was well thought out.
And that's with participation from, you know, from the locals.
Local.
So the regional development councils were very important.
Yes, I was able to. I had the privilege to sit in the RDC 7 when I was in government. And well, I served under your mom, and you know, despite the unpopularity, some people say, why do you keep on defending, or why do you talk about GMA's achievements? That was before, and you know, and it's unpopular. You're not very strategic. I said, you know what? I saw what she did, and I don't think it's fair that she's being criticized, condemned. In fact, not even criticized. Criticized is a very
She's vilified.
vilified.
Yes.
Yeah, and then I saw your mom work, and to this day, I will, regardless of what people say, I still am very proud to have served. My first job in my first job ever was under your mom, and I saw how hard she worked and how focused she was on the task at hand. You know? Do you disagree with your mom? Did she ever consult you guys in matters of
No.
matters of state?
No, and I think for us that was very clear that that's her work. We weren't elected. We have no say.
Yeah.
So I told you before, I also never meddled
I know
in
that.
anything, and even if I wanted to, I couldn't do anything. So I remember in the early days where people would give me their resumes and said, here, please, and I'm sorry, but I can't be the conduit because I'm not in government. So please, you know, give it to the proper channels. And some people would get surprised that they would get appointed. But that was something she also picked up from my grandfather. You look at, apart from, you know, from whoever was nominating you, you also look at the background of the person. If the person is qualified, you get the person who fits best in that job.
That's right. Like in my case, I'm not from a political family. I went through the process, no? And well, I had a very interesting experience in government. I had to leave, and we had a disagreement on, but just because she was not apprised, I think, of the situation. Right. But what I liked about your mom is, 8 months after I left my job, she called me to the palace, and well, she didn't say sorry, but she said, you know, I called you here to clear the air. She gave me a good 14 minutes of her time, and I was like 25 years old, and it sounded like an apology, and I think it was very humble of the president of my country to be giving me somebody who, you know, I mean, I was neither a congressman with an impeachment vote to trade or a billionaire with millions to donate to campaign or whatever, but she gave me the time of day, and she respected, no?
Well, one of the things people don't understand about her is that she doesn't take things personally. So she looks at the job at hand, and that's what she focuses on.
Yes.
So if something doesn't get done, you know, yes, she had a temper, so she would get impatient if certain things wouldn't get done, and you'd feel that. But that doesn't mean that she hated you.
Yeah, I noticed that also. Example, she'd scold an official, but you know, 30 minutes later,
right?
If
you did something well,
you know, your mom really, she's the type who doesn't, I agree, she doesn't take things personally, because I visit her regularly in veterans, and for like how many years already has she been there? Like almost 4 years. And I think it's no secret that I'm a critic of the incumbent president. And of course, I'd go into rants, and you would never hear her badmouth President Aquino or anyone. She would discuss issues, set the record straight, but you will never hear her name call or bash anyone. And in fact, one time I was visiting with a few friends who are not fans of Mar Rojas, and you'd think that she'd chime in, no? But well, she her opinion of Mar Rojas was based on when he worked for me as DTI secretary. She gave she was a glowing recommendation, and it's so big of her, very magnanimous, and you'd expect someone in her situation to be probably more mad. I think I'm more mad.
Well, that is a grace that the rest of the family are still hoping to get, but that's really the way she is. She really doesn't hold grudges, and that's part of her being prayerful.
It's really class. I mean, if your liberty has been stripped, I mean, you've been stripped of your liberty and dignity, and to still have, I don't know, the restraint, to suffer in silence like that, that's a gift, and that for me that shows true class and breeding and pedigree. So that's something I can really attest to.
Thank you.
But let's go back to economics, because that's the forte. 3 generations in your family are economists. Your grandfather, your mom, and you.
Yes.
And well, the country, we're more. The political dramas are far more fascinating, I think, for the public than the economic side of things. But the socio-economic implications of our politics, for me, is really what's more important, and it doesn't get translated into communication,
yes,
into a language that people understand.
It's not easy to communicate policy when you're talking about addressing the system. It's easier to tear down a person's character or personality. And that's something that we really need to look at. That hopefully in this next elections, we look at the program of government of the candidates. That's what will affect all of us.
Yeah. Your mom campaigned. I think most of her platforms of government were realized, except for those that were very politicized. I think like federalism, I mean a shift to parliamentary and federal government, and the ZTE. I mean
the national
broadband yes, network. That would have given us strong internet. And I remember telling your mom one time that she was crucified for it. Might as well just go on with the project, because all the issues were beneath her. She was not really involved in the alleged bribery attempt. And for me, if I'm working on a contract that would really, one, realize one of my platforms, and number two, give my country much better internet than what we have now, then
I think what the people didn't realize back then was ZTE was not, a small new business. Even in anywhere you go in Southeast Asia, Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, ZTE is there. They are a competitor. They are a supplier, a known supplier of telecoms equipment.
Yeah.
Here, unfortunately, at the time, what the press didn't pick up was one of the other proponents, or those who were bidding, was a new company set up by the son of a sitting congressman. And if you look at the rules, he should have been disqualified.
Yeah.
But people don't pick up on that because it's a matter of principle that's hard to explain. So
most of the issues that we face,
it's easier to bash somebody and say you're corrupt.
Yeah, that's right. Sayang, for me, it should have been pursued, and we would not be complaining about the kind of internet we have in our country today if it was implemented, the NB and ZTE. But well, that's water under the bridge. Moving forward, hopefully the next crop of candidates will have a good program of government that involves our cyber connectivity.
Well, particularly because a lot of our industries depend on our telecommunication infrastructure.
That's right.
The business process outsourcing, which was a new industry in my mother's time.
Yeah, we'll talk about the business process outsourcing because well, it's really helped our economy, you know, and it's provided a lot of jobs to fresh graduates. But unfortunately, we have to pause for another break. Open mic, we will be right back. We're back here on Open Mic with Luli Arroyo Bernas. Before we proceed, there is a question from the Freeman, Christine Quintas. How does your family feel being the scapegoat of the Pinay administration and its failures since he started office?
Well, I mean, it's never fun to be the demonyo, right? But it's not something that we can really do anything about. What, for me personally, what I'm grateful for is that there are certain programs that she started that he continued, and so, you know.
Conditional cash transfer.
Although,
not so
yes,
much. No?
well,
it was much smaller then.
Yes, that really was supposed to be a stopgap measure. That after a certain time, you're able to get on your own feet and, you know, have your own job and all that. So
institutionalized rollout.
Yes, exactly. So, but a lot of things that she started were continued in this administration. So in a way, we're grateful.
And in fact, some people say that the best thing that President Aquino has done related to the economy is that he never did anything to stop the policies that were already in place. He didn't introduce a new policy. He didn't amend anything. So, so the momentum is continues. No?
Yeah. So one of the other things that was started during her time was the Anti-Red Tape Act. So there are many things that became faster during her time. So for instance, your driver's license, what used to take a month before you could get your ID, during her time became automated.
That's right.
And you could get your card the same.
And even at the mall. No?
Yeah, the same day that you went there. So those are some of the things that were.
I remember before that happened, I had a fixer problem, the LTO here, and I made sumbong to you.
Right.
And then you parang course it through up to Aneli Lontok ba yun? So, but anyway, like there's this journalist, US-based journalist, no? And she was saying that the problem after the Marcos regime is that they elected someone after the Marcos regime who is even worse than Marcos, and she was referring to your mom. And so I really said, in what sense are you saying? I mean, what is the context of this? Where are you coming from? Why do you say that she was a lot worse than Marcos? And she said she institutionalized corruption. I say, what do you mean? Because, like for example, PDAF has been there as a mechanism. It's prone to abuse. Do you agree? It's prone to abuse, but at the time she used it also to push for the policies that eventually helped, you know, buoy our economy through tough times. But that it was already in place even before her.
Yeah. Well, the thing with a lot of these critics, as I said, it's very easy to criticize without actually naming specifics.
Yes.
Or looking at facts, and then when you give them the facts, they go, "Well, I don't know about that."
Yeah.
So, for instance, with that, you know, when we look at the economy, my grandfather left the economy of the Philippines at number 2 to Japan, and where did we go from there? That's very clear. It wasn't a very easy 20 plus years, and a lot of the policies that he put in place were reversed. So under Marcos, you know, there were nationalization programs of certain industries which were completely opposite of what he did. But at the time, if you look at what was happening around the world, other Latin American countries were doing the same thing, because for them it was a strike against imperialism.
Nationalization.
Yes, but not looking at the economic impact on that.
But our identity as a people, our geography, and
we are
our
completely
culture,
away from, yes.
I agree with modernizing agriculture, because that is how we started. We cannot be too far from our core.
Yeah. But with regards to the pork barrel, I mean, that was something existing, I guess, from the time of the Commonwealth.
Because it's a very American
Yes, it's something we
mechanism,
picked up from the U.S. But also, if you look at what it was for, it really was development assistance. So it should go to priority projects of the countryside where it's needed. That was not included in the budget. That's how it was supposed to be used. Because if you look at, just the legal aspects of it, at the time it was legal. But
yes,
when was it deemed illegal?
Just recently.
Just recently.
The Supreme Court struck down the Priority Development Assistance Fund, or PDAF, aka pork barrel, and the DAP separately as unconstitutional. Only
Well, DAP is even worse, because there's no.
It's not in the budget.
It's not in the budget, so there's no. Congress cannot say anything. It's really one branch that holds the key to that.
It's
So
practically
that's difficult.
fiscal dictatorship. In my
There's no check and balance.
Yeah.
So
that's why I told this journalist, what are you saying that she institutionalized corruption? If you're talking about the pork barrel, it was there before her, and it's even worse now because there's DAP, and during her time it was legal, and in America they use it. The president also uses it to push for
for the legislation agenda.
Legislative agenda of the executive. And in your mom's case, she actually also did the same thing. I remember when I was complaining to her 2 months before the PDAF scandal broke. The PDAF scandal with Janet Napoles. It was April 2013. I was telling your mom, ano ba to si Pinoy? He withholds and releases the PDAF on a whim based on, what he wants. Or his legislative agenda also, which is RH, or, whatever pet bills he had pending in Congress. And your mom said, well, I will not criticize him because I did the same thing. And all the presidents did the same thing. They used the PDAF as a tool to push for some of the reform, especially the unpopular reforms, like I think
for the legislative agenda. Yes.
Yeah. So it's really, that's why when people say she institutionalized corruption, I ask, can you name like a specific activity? Because if it's PDAF, that's the case, no? And it's just been recently struck down.
Well, even if you look at the amounts, it wasn't during her time. Was it the biggest? No, it wasn't. In terms of the budget that went to PDAF, it wasn't the biggest in her time. So, in her time, I mean, they relied on the budget, and whether Congress approved it or not, my mother had a plan they had a medium-term development plan that they had to follow. So, for me, what were the things that she tried to do? She tried to change the system, put processes in place, so that
like the anti-red
you
tape.
don't get, so that the abuse lessens.
Yeah.
So you reduce the steps in setting up a business. You reduce the amount of time that you get your driver's license or your passport. You automate specific things so that you lessen the spaces where corruption can happen. If you also look at what she tried to do in customs, that wasn't easy. And the people she put there, some of them were just laughed out of office because the people who were already there from before, their attitude was, you're only here for 6 years or 9 years.
Terminals or something.
Yeah, we're here forever. So
It's
good luck
culture.
to you if you want to change things. And then, the bashing continues. So it's not easy to change a system that's been there.
It's easier said than done.
Yeah, for decades.
Well, even now, no? I mean, you have all these laglagbala issues in the airport. I mean, little things. But let's go back to the economy, because I really think your mom, she was focused on that, and she succeeded in what she set out to do, to strengthen our economy. And then we've had upgrades, and Moody's actually recently gave credit to her that,
Yes.
that the gains that we continue to feel right now started, and the reforms are because of reforms that started during your mom's time as president. In fact, the first upgrade.
Yeah, was during the last few years of my mother's administration, and specifically during the time when the world was in recession. We got an upgrade, an investment upgrade, and that was a big deal. But the press didn't pick it up because she wasn't really popular.
She wasn't popular. That's why I was asking about. In hindsight, does she think she should have concentrated also on the PR communication side of governance?
Yeah, but when you're hit every day and the networks aren't for you, I think it doesn't matter how much PR you do, and then you're stuck into just focusing on the communications, and then you leave the work
to govern.
Yeah, so it's not easy. And I don't envy the next president, especially now when people can tweet whatever they want, or
sometimes it's taken as
or
gospel
rant
truth.
online. Yes, it's not easy.
A lot of my friends from overseas, especially those who studied international relations and economics, they tell me that President Arroyo, if she was president of a first world country, she'd be greatly appreciated. Her leadership style is more for like a first world country.
Well, my hope for her is really that in the future, when people study her time and with greater objectivity, that they see what she did was good for the country. That's the only hope we have.
I think it's starting, because more and more people have started to appreciate the good things that she's done.
I hope so.
Unfortunately, I'd still like to talk more with you on your mom and her achievements, but our time is up. Any parting message for our Cebuano viewers? Because your mom won in Cebu.
Yes. I want to thank everybody who tuned in for giving me the time. Thank you, Mike, for inviting me to talk about my mother and what her achievements were during her 9 years in office. They weren't an easy 9 years, but what gave her strength was always, one of the things was really the Cebuano voters. She won in 2004 because of Cebu. You gave her, I think, a million votes as margin, and that's why she decided to hold her oath-taking here to recognize the mandate that she got from the Cebuanos. One of the other things that she did was she put a Malacanang office here, because she found that many from Visayas and Mindanao would rather come to Cebu to meet with her on policy issues here than go to Manila. So she made those efforts to reach out to the country. So, and those are the things that keep her spirits up to now. When people send messages or when they come to visit her, it's not a popular thing to do, but she appreciates the visits that or the efforts that people make to either visit her or send messages of support. So thank you very much.
And thank you, because I know the Arroyo family, they shun the media and they're not interviewed always. And in fact, you try to stay away, from and you've had a few tragedies, losses in the family, and you've never seen them exploit a loss to gain sympathy from the public. Unlike others who call for a press con because somebody died to gain sympathy. Always very dignified silence. But thank you for accepting my invitation because I'm a kulit person. But I really wish the president well, the former president well, and I hope things go well for her. And you mentioned, before we go, you mentioned how the people give her strength, messages of support. One time, I took a cab to visit your mom, and we were, from Makati to veterans along EDSA. He just mentioned that the president, that you're going to veterans, in Tagalog, of course, you're going to veterans. Nandyan si President Arroyo. In fact, I'm visiting her. Siya talaga, as soon as I was about to get off the car, and siya, boss, pwede bang meron akong isulat para kay PGMA? Ko, sige. So he got he was looking for a piece of paper to write on, and he found a receipt, and he borrowed my ball pen, and he wrote something there. And I gave it to your mom. Actually, I read it, and it was a short note, and it said there, Madam President, sorry po na hinusgahan po namin kayo, pero salamat po sa lahat ng nagawa nyo. Pagaling po kayo, mahal namin kayo. And I gave it to your mom, and she was, I could see in her eyes that she was very happy. Fucking. Anyway, thank you.
That's what you learned from Boy Abunda, making people cry.
I will always remember that the taxi, that visit of mine with the taxi. So anyway, before I burst into tears, this has been our 11th episode on 11/11. This has been Mike Lopez. Until next week on another episode of Open Mic. Good night and Godspeed.